The plane touched down smoothly on the runway, and the announcement that you had arrived in Seoul played over the intercom. You let out a tired sigh, rolling your stiff shoulders. After a week of endless meetings and business negotiations in the US, you were finally home. As you walked through the bustling terminal, you couldn't help but smile, thinking of Jungkook. Despite your packed schedule, he had called you every single day, filling the distance between you with his warmth. "I'll pick you up no matter what. I missed you too much not to be the first person you see," he had said during your last call. His voice was full of excitement. Dragging your suitcase behind you, you exited the terminal and scanned the crowd for his familiar face, but Jungkook was nowhere to be found. You frowned, pulling out your phone to check for messages. There was nothing. You waited a few minutes, thinking maybe he was stuck in traffic, but when the minutes stretched too long, your worry grew. You called him, but the line went straight to voicemail. "Jungkook," you whispered to yourself, pacing anxiously. This wasn't like him at all. He was always punctual, and he had never ignored your calls. Just as you were about to call again, your phone buzzed. Relief washed over you when you saw his name flashing on the screen. "Jungkook, where are you?" you asked, trying to keep the worry out of your voice. "I'm sorry, baby, something came up, but I'm on my way. I'll be there in a few minutes." He sounded a little out of breath. "Is everything okay?" "Yes, don't worry, just wait for me. I'll explain when I get there." You sighed, still uneasy, but nodded. "Okay, I'll wait." The call ended and you leaned against a pillar, watching cars pull up and drive away as other passengers were greeted by their loved ones. It took nearly half an hour before Jungkook's car finally pulled up. Your irritation from the wait faded slightly as you saw him step out of the car, his familiar warm smile spreading across his face. "Ryan," he called out, jogging towards you. Before you could say a word, he pulled you into a tight hug, wrapping his arms around you securely. "Welcome back, love. I missed you so much," he murmured softly before pulling back to kiss your forehead. You softened for a moment under his affection, but then your earlier frustration returned. "Why were you late? I've been standing here forever." "I know, love, and I'm sorry. I was stuck in a work, but I promise it won't happen again." You pouted while he pecked your pouted lips, making you shy. Even after being one of the renowned businesswomen and known for your cold nature, you were just a normal girl in love with your boyfriend. His love has spoiled you so much. Before you could say more, the passenger door of his car opened and Soojin stepped out. "Welcome back, Ryan," Soojin said brightly, walking towards you with a cheery smile. You blinked as your heart sank and confusion clouded your mind. Jungkook had brought Soojin with him. "Why, Soojin?" you said, forcing a tight smile as you pulled her into a quick hug. "Thanks." Your eyes darted to Jungkook, who was now loading your suitcase into the trunk. You wanted to ask him why he was with her, why he had made you wait, why he hadn't told you she was coming, but you couldn't find the words. "Let's go home," Jungkook said as he opened the door for you, flashing you his signature bunny smile. "Jungkook, now you can go with Ryan. I'll take a taxi from here." Jungkook looked at her. "Why would you take a taxi? I'll drop you off at your place." Soojin's house was in the opposite direction. "No, you must have got tired, and Ryan must be tired too. Take her home." You were not understanding what was happening. Jungkook looked at you. "I'm sure there won't be any problem, right, love? We can drop her home." You forced a tight smile and nodded. "Sure." You walked and sat on the passenger seat while Soojin sat at the back and Jungkook started the engine. After dropping Soojin at her house, Jungkook finally drove you to your apartment. It wasn't officially labeled as your place together, but most of your nights were spent here with him, your lives gradually blending into one another without the need of any label. The moment you stepped inside, you dropped your bags near the door and flopped onto the couch with a heavy sigh, letting the exhaustion of your trip wash over you. Jungkook followed, his expression soft with concern as he crouched down to remove your shoes for you. You look like you have been through hell, he said. His tone was laced with affection. I feel like I have, you replied, leaning your back against the cushion. Stay there, he instructed, his lips brushing your forehead briefly before he disappeared into the kitchen. You watched him move around with ease, the familiar sound of clicking mugs and the faint aroma of coffee filling the air. Moments like these reminded you of how much you loved him, not the grand gestures, but the little things, the unspoken acts of care. He returned a few minutes later holding two streaming mugs. Handing one to you, he sat down beside you, draping his free arm over the back of the couch. How was the trip? His eyes never leaving yours. You took a sip of the coffee, letting the warmth chase away some of the lingering fatigue. Tough, the client was ridiculously demanding. It was like every time I thought we would reach an agreement, they would throw another curveball. But you nailed it, didn't you? He asked. There was a hint of pride in his voice. You smirked, tilting your head to look at him. Of course I did. Did you doubt me? Never. You are the most capable woman I know. You couldn't help but smile back, the tension from the trip melting away. I missed you though, like literally missed you. His expression softened and he set his mug down before pulling you closer to him. I missed you more, he murmured while his lips brushed against your temple. You leaned into his embrace, your head resting against his chest. I know you called me every day, but it wasn't the same. I missed this. I missed being home with you. I know, he said softly, pressing a kiss to your hair. It wasn't the same for me either. Every day felt like it dragged on forever without you here. You tilted your head up to look at him, your fingers brushed against his cheek. You are such a snap-drawn Jungkook. And you love it, he teased with a mischievous glint in his eyes. I do. I love everything about you. He leaned in, his lips capturing yours in a slow, lingering kiss that made you forget the fatigue, the trip, and even the unease from earlier. For now, it was just the two of you and nothing else mattered. You were sitting in your office surrounded by piles of papers and your laptop showing a bunch of emails. The day had been long and tiring, filled with meetings and decisions, but one thought kept bothering you. Jungkook hadn't called you all day. It wasn't like him. Even on the busiest days, he would find a moment to send a text or call just to check in. You told yourself not to overthink it. He had work too, after all. But as the hours ticked by, the uneasy feeling in your chest grew stronger. Unable to focus any longer, you reached for your phone and dialed his number. It rang and rang and rang. With each passing second, your heart sank further, imagining all sorts of scenarios. Finally, just when you were about to hang up, he answered. Hey, his voice came through slightly breathless. Where are you? You asked, trying to keep your tone light, though your nerves betrayed you. Sorry, I've been a bit busy. I'll meet you tonight, okay? His tone sounded a bit distant. You nodded even though he couldn't see you. Okay, I understand. Work? Before he could answer, you heard a faint voice in the background, a woman's voice. Jungkook, did you get the file? Your heart dropped. It was Soojin. The voice was faint, almost like she was far away, but it was unmistakable. You froze, clutching the phone tighter. Are you with Soojin? There was a pause. Yeah, he admitted, sounding hesitant. I'll explain later, okay? I really have to go now. The call ended before you could say anything else. You stared at the screen for a long moment, the word call ended burning into your eyes. A heavy weight settled in your chest, one you couldn't shake no matter how hard you tried. It wasn't the first time you had noticed Jungkook spending more time with Soojin. Ever since you came back from the US, it felt like she was always around. At first you chalked it up to think their childhood bond. You told yourself it was nothing to worry about. He loved you, not her. But now hearing her voice, knowing he was with her while you were sitting alone in your office, it hurt in a way you couldn't explain. You tried to push the thoughts away, driving back into your work, but they kept creeping back. Questions swirled in your mind. Why was he spending so much time with her? Why didn't he tell you where he was? You didn't want to feel this way, jealous, insecure, but you couldn't help it. Jungkook was everything to you, and the thought of losing him, even to someone as close to him as Soojin, was unbearable. You were curled up on the couch, leaning into Jungkook's chest as his arms wrapped around you. The soft glow of the lamp lit the room, and the quiet hum of the city outside filled the silence. His fingers gently played with your hair as you snuggled closer, feeling his warmth ease some of the tension from your long day. But no matter how comforting the moment was, a nagging thought wouldn't leave your mind. You had to ask. You tilted your head slightly to look at him. Your voice was soft but hesitant. Jungkook, what were you doing with Soojin earlier? You asked, trying to keep your tone casual, though the worry was clear in your eyes. Jungkook froze for a moment, his fingers stopped mid-motion in your hair. You felt the slight shift in his breathing, and you could tell he was thinking about how to respond. He started but quickly trailed off. His gaze dropped to the floor as he let out a small sigh. He wanted to tell you everything about Soojin's illness, her grandmother's desperate plea, and how he was trying to be there for her when no one else could. But how could he? You were already carrying so much burden. He knew how hard it had been for you after losing your brother last year. Taking over the company had been overwhelming, and you had worked tirelessly to keep everything together. He couldn't add to your stress, not when you were already dealing with so much. Soojin had made him promise to keep her illness a secret from you, insisting that the last thing you needed was another burden to carry. I was just helping her with some personal stuff, he finally said, keeping his voice calm. He looked at you with a soft smile, hoping to reassure you. You know how she is. She gets flustered over the smallest things. You nodded slowly, but the unease in your chest didn't go away. You trusted Jungkook, but something about his answer felt off. He wasn't lying, but he wasn't telling you the whole truth either. You have been around her a lot lately, you said quietly, trying to sound more curious than accusatory. I mean, I understand she's your best friend, but it feels like, I don't know, like something's different. Jungkook gently cupped your face, tilting your chin up so you could meet his eyes. Fine, don't overthink it, okay? Soojin's just going through a tough time, and I'm trying to be there for her, that's all. You searched his face, trying to find any sign of hesitation or guilt, but all you saw was tenderness. Still, the nagging feeling in your heart wouldn't go away. Okay, I don't want to lose you. Jungkook's expression softened even more, and he pulled you closer, pressing a kiss to your forehead. You're not going to lose me, baby. Never. You're my everything. He murmured, his voice was filled with sincerity. As you rested your head back against his chest, Jungkook tightened his hold on you. Guilt weighed heavily on him, but he told himself he was doing the right thing. You had enough on your plate, and the last thing he wanted was to add to your pain. For now, he would keep the truth to himself, even if it hurt. As the days went on, you couldn't ignore the growing distance between you and Jungkook. You hated to admit it, but jealousy and suspicion were beginning to creep into your heart. It wasn't that you didn't trust him, it was just he seemed to be spending much time with Soojin lately. Every time his phone rang, he would leave in a hurry without much of an explanation. At first, you told yourself it was fine, he was just helping his best friend, but as it kept happening, it started to bother you more and more. It wasn't just the calls, he seemed distracted, and no matter how much you tried to shake it off, it made you feel irritated and uneasy. Whenever you asked him what was going on, Jungkook would brush it off with a soft smile and say, I'll explain everything later. But later never came, and the vague answer only made you feel worse. You didn't want to seem clingy or insecure, but it was hard to keep quiet when your heart was screaming with questions. Why was he always running to Soojin? Why couldn't he tell you what was happening? Now it felt like the tension was too much to bear. You couldn't keep pretending that everything was okay. The feeling that something was being hidden from you was eating away at you, and you knew you couldn't hold it any longer. You needed answers. Jungkook's heart was racing as he pushed open the front door of Soojin's small house. The sound of muffled sobs filled the air, and his chest tightened at the sight of Soojin's grandmother, hunched over in tears in the living room. Grandma, what happened? He asked, his voice trembled as he moved closer. The elderly woman looked up, her face pale and streaked with tears. She clutched her trembling hands to her chest as she struggled to speak. She just collapsed. She said she felt dizzy and then she fainted. I don't know what to do. Jungkook's blood ran cold as he turned his gaze to the floor where Soojin lay unconscious, her face pale and her breathing shallow. His heart sank and for a moment he felt paralyzed by fear, but then the urgency of the situation snapped him back to reality. Grandma, it's going to be okay, he said firmly, trying to steady his voice for her sake. He crouched down carefully, sliding his arms under Soojin's fragile body. She felt so light, too light, and it only made the knot in his chest tighten further. Please, Jungkook, save her, Soojin's grandmother pleaded, clutching at his arms as he stood with Soojin in his arms. She's all I have left. Please don't let anything happen to her. Jungkook swallowed the lump in his throat, nodding sharply. I'll get her to the hospital. She'll be okay, I promise, he said, though he wasn't sure who was he trying to convince, her grandmother or himself. He moved quickly, carrying Soojin out to his car. His breaths came fast and uneven as he carefully laid her in the back seat. He glanced at her still face, his hands trembling as he adjusted her head to make sure she was comfortable. Closing the door, he rushed to the driver's seat and started the engine. The tires screeched against the pavement as he sped down the road, his knuckles white as he gripped the steering wheel. Hang in there, Soojin, he whispered, glancing at her through the rearview mirror. His chest felt heavy with guilt and helplessness. No matter how much he tried to prepare himself for moments like this, it never got easier. You sat in the small cafe, your eyes darting to the clock on the wall every few minutes. The romantic ambience you had carefully chosen now felt suffocating as the minutes stretched into hours. The candle on the table flickered weakly. You fiddled with the edge of the napkin in frustration. He had promised he would come. He had even seemed excited earlier in the day, teasing you about what you might wear and how he couldn't wait to see you. But now you stared at the untouched coffee in front of you, doubts crept into your mind. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the bell above the cafe door jingled. You turned sharply and saw Jungkook walking in. Relief washed over you for a split second, but it quickly turned into anger as you took in his disheveled appearance. His hair was a mess, his tie was askew, and his usually pristine suit was wrinkled. He looked pale, almost as if he hadn't slept in days. You stood up abruptly, your chair scraping loudly against the floor. Jungkook, you said sharply, your voice trembled with a mix of anger and hurt. He rushed over to you, his eyes filled with guilt. I'm so sorry, Wang. Where were you? You demanded, cutting him off. I've been waiting here for hours. You promised you would be here. I know something came up. What came up, Jungkook? Where were you? He hesitated for a moment, running a hand through his messy hair. Why and actually, Soojin? And just like that, your patience snapped. The name alone felt like a trigger, a spark igniting the fire that had been simmering inside you for days. Soojin. It's always Soojin, isn't it? Every time I ask where you are, it's her. Every time I need you, you are with her. I'm sick of this, Jungkook. Ryan, it's not what you think. He started reaching out to you, but you took a step back. No, Jungkook. Do you even realize how much it hurts? I've been waiting here like a fool, thinking that maybe, just maybe you would finally put me first, but no. It's always her these days. He looked at you with wide eyes, his lips parting as if he wanted to explain, but you didn't let him. Do you even love me, Jungkook? Or is Soojin the only one who matters to you now? You spat, tears welling up in your eyes. Why? Let me explain. It's not like what you are thinking. I can't do this anymore, Jungkook. If Soojin is so important to you, then maybe you should just be with her, you said before he could finish. The words hung heavy in the air, and you saw the pain flash across his face, but you were too angry, too hurt to stop now. We are done. I'm done. His eyes widened with shock and fear. He shook his head, trying to come near you, but you grabbed your purse, ready to leave. Why, no, please hear me. You looked at him angrily while tears filled your eyes completely. There's nothing to hear, Jungkook. It ends here. But you couldn't stay. You turned on your heel and walked out of the cafe, the cool evening air hitting your tear-streaked face.